Hello, I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer from Orthogonal. We're here today with MedTech Spotlight Live, the Anaheim Convention Center at MD&M West. Our principle here with MedTech Spotlight Live is you can't make it to every conference, and if you do, you can't meet every interesting person at a conference. So we're here to bring some of the best of the conference here to you. Today we have our friend Ashkon, who's here. Ashkon, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody a little about your very interesting background in MedTech and what you're working on these days.
Sure. I'm Ashkon Rasooli. I have my own consulting firm. It's kind of like a boutique consulting firm called Engenius Solution that focuses on software, SAMD, software and medical device. Necessarily AI and cybersecurity is a part of them. I have a unique background, just kind of focusing on software and medical devices. I've done product management. I've done regulatory work. I've done software testing, and I've actually done coding. And because of that, I've kind of gained a very life cycle knowledge based around just kind of product development life cycle for software as a medical device. But what I've got the most experience with and focused on is quality management systems. And so what I do with the consulting firm is focus on basically software as a medical device and software in a medical device.
Very good. So you spoke today at the conference.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about what your talk was and key takeaways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll say the introduction, the final slides, kind of in the interest of time. I spoke about how AI as a technology is just impacting the cybersecurity landscape. And, the way this is actually an idea that was inspired by a esteemed colleague of mine, Eric Henry, about AI having three different roles in the cybersecurity space: attacker, defender, and target. And so I kind of just expanded on how AI is shaping the new attacks, the new defenses, but also how AI models themselves are becoming a target. And with the medical device industry, that part is actually particularly important because attacks on the AI models or the data for the AI models translate to patient safety. Whether it is changing the functionality of your device, whether it is a disruption of healthcare delivery, it is extremely important. And so, I gave examples of this, but really the key takeaway was this race in the cybersecurity landscape of attackers coming up with new attacks and defender coming up with new defenses has just gotten faster and taken on a whole new stage. And some of the old controls remain valid. We just have to enforce them a lot more rigidly and be more diligent. And in some cases, though, particularly if you are incorporating AI in your medical device as a part of it, you have to add new controls related to AI safety. Specifically, I pointed to the just good manufacturing practices, the GMLPs for machine learning, the good machine learning practices, and things like data security, things like transparency, explainability, and that kind of stuff. But those are the safeguards we have right now in terms of AI and cybersecurity.
So what's something that is an existing control that we just need to take more seriously or more?
Yeah, so, there's a few examples. One of the attacks I talked about was model poisoning. And that is where an attacker, with the interest of destroying your model and impacting its effectiveness, would poison your training data, your verification data, possibly your fine-tuning data. And the goal is to get their particular use case, give the specific output that they want. For example, like you have a spam detection email filter and you want your spams to go through, you just poison the data set with your version of spam, and the machine learns that, this is not spam. And so the existing control that still continues to work in that case is access controls. We currently do recognize the hazardous situations using 14971 terms of unauthorized access to data. And we currently do have controls in place for that. The principle of, least access, you only have to have access if necessary. We just have to be aware that the stakes are higher now. With data, it's not just the data exposure. The other thing that could happen is you put out product that is defective.
All right.
Yeah.
So help me out, because I've probably seen too many James Bond and Die Hard movies, but I get the danger of somebody poisoning a model. What's the motivation in 2025 for somebody to attack
Yeah, I mean, the motivations at the end of the day remain the classical human motivations because AI's changed what humans haven't, right?
Okay.
And so it's monetary motivations if it's a competitor wanting to destroy your product in the interest of their product kind of winning the market. But the other motivations would be access to data so they can sell your data. There are cases where, in model inversion attacks, for example, they can reverse engineer the training data. There's a case where, for example, when authentication is happening using someone's face, using a series of inputs and output pairs, they could reverse engineer the faces and therefore identify people and then also get access through authentication. And so the human motivation behind these attacks remain the same. It's just how it's done, is now transforming because of the introduction of this technology.
Very interesting. So one of the other things about you is you're one of a handful of people I know in medtech who's not just published your opinions, but put out a manifesto, or maybe you tell it like in Seinfeld terms, it's an airing of the grievances. So tell us about
Yeah.
your manifesto.
Yeah, it started with the fact that I had one of my very early mentors tell me that quality management systems is there for a reason, and it should be 90% just common sense and good engineering practices, and the work you do should only be minimally for compliance. There's a reason behind every single quality management system procedure and the records we would generate. But then as I, kept working, throughout the years, I identified specifically the missteps that go against that principle. And so I came up with this manifesto called the Non-BS Manifesto, as I call it, which is a nod to FDA's least burdensome principle. So the BS actually stands for burdensome. It's the idea of 4 best practices. It is modeled after the Agile Manifesto that, if followed, you can create a QMS that is the least burdensome and non-burdensome even. This is particularly applicable to the world of software because it actually lends itself much better to things like automation, automatic generation of records, having processes that are, less burdensome. And, there's some common sense items that we lose sight of in everyday operations, like quality over proceduralism. You will, if I had a nickel for every time someone outside of quality correctly complained about the fact that quality is just having me to do this checklist and I don't know what the use of this is. And I've asked quality, why you're asking for that? And they just say it's in the procedure without actually being able to explain, right? So the checklist mentality, bottom line, procedures should be there to meet a particular intent. So first one's quality over proceduralism. The second one has to do with culture over mandate. This is something I've felt in the many different environments, startup, mid-size, or large corporations. Systems are as good as the people that implement them. And people will only fully achieve the ultimate objective of your quality system if they actually understand why they're doing it and they're just not handed a checklist. And so there's a difference between, let's say, a software engineer that understands why requirements and documentation is important and therefore refuses to finalize code unless they have requirements, versus a software engineer that sees requirements as just this piece of document that somebody annoying for compliance requires, and therefore does everything all the way to sometimes, and I've seen this, push to production without having requirements. And you could have all the SOPs you want, all the work instructions you want, but if you don't have that culture in place, it's not going to be followed. It's not going to be stuck to. The third principle is just preventing redundancy, conciseness over redundancy. A lot of the QMS architecture designs I've seen, they have repeated information all around, which is only a recipe for additional workload that is unnecessary.
Kind of like filling out the same form at 8 doctors,
At
all in
8
the same
doctors, at 8
organization.
doctors. And that, my friend, every time gets me. It is annoying, right? But the other thing that it really has the risk of is at some point, somebody's going to forget where else to update, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, similar to the doctor situation, I guarantee you some doctors, have pulled information from you, the wrong information, and no single doctor possibly has the correct.
And there's
full
no chance you
comprehensive
remembered
information.
every medicine you've ever been on at every doctor you've been to.
Yes, exactly. And so I think really overall, these principles are designed to say, listen, we want to have the least amount of work necessary to achieve the most quality, because the fourth one is exactly also just be concise over verbosity. I have over and over again seen these procedures written with the word count in mind. The real thing that adds quality to the process is 3 sentences. Those are the things I want you to follow. But then it doesn't look, to have a 1-page procedure. And so people just keep talking. And what happens is you have all of this text that is, if anything, liability in an audit and no value from a quality standpoint. But the other thing that it does, especially since a lot of our trainings are read and acknowledge now out in the industry, you have a lot of fluff that is meaningless, which makes your training ineffective because people are bored, they don't see a point, and so they just treat it as something they got to click, read, and acknowledge on without actually fully understanding the reason for it, because you're not conveying the meaning.
Like the terms of service on a Wi-Fi.
100%, which we've all agreed to and still do not know.
Right. Very good.
So those are the 4 principles. It's modeled after, the 4 principles of the Agile Manifesto, which, also was about kind of, getting the work done over documenting. So same story.
Great. Well, thanks a lot. One last question.
Sure.
You're a local.
Yes.
How many times have you been to Disneyland?
Oh boy, I've only been there twice. I will say though that I have a lot of pressure on me to get one of these local season passes and go every week. So if you're a local, it's a thing you do, beware.
Okay. And favorite ride?
Space Mountain.
Space Mountain.
Yes.
Classic.
Yes, classic.
Goodie.
Yes,
All right, good.
classic.
Well, thanks for coming out.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.